Everyone, please stand. We'll get our meeting underway here. Welcome to the Cade Museum for this Tuesday, May 18th meeting of the Rotary Club of Gainesville. My name is Tom Collette, your Sergeant at Arms. Before we begin, please silence your cell phones. And if you're watching this after the fact on YouTube, we ask that you please register your participation by sending us an email to info@rotarygainesville.org. Again, that's info@rotarygainesville.org. We will start our meeting today, as we always do, with a song, then the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'll do My Country 'Tis of Thee. Are you ready, Gordon? My country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. Now let's pledge allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, folks, please remain standing for our invocation today, offered by Eric Spivey.
Join me in prayer. Oh God, our Creator, you are alive in the world. And today, as our Rotary Club meets in this center and museum of creativity dedicated to science, innovation, and invention, may your creativity become alive in our members. Help us, O Lord, to see the challenges that we face in business, in government, in families, education, and institutions, even in our own lives, not as barriers to your future, but as opportunities for creative thinking, servant leadership, and open-ended politics. Lord, the world around us is filled with problems that many call unsolvable, and yet the work of Rotary International demonstrates when invested people put their collective creative minds together and patiently work day after day, even the unsolvable can become solvable. When we look at the decline of polio around the world today, let it be a reminder to us as Rotarians to stay the course, stay connected, and be creative. In your name we pray, amen.
Thank you, Eric. If you're a visiting Rotarian or you're a Rotarian of our club and you have a guest here today, you can remain standing. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on. We have no announcements today for you, but I know a gentleman who always has something to say. That's your president, Matthew Brady.
All right, that was quicker than I anticipated. So thank you all for being patient. A little bit of delayed start. Had a little trip in the parking lot and just making sure everybody's okay. So appreciate patience there. Priority is making sure everybody's okay, right? So thank you all. I'm trying to catch up, be honest with you. I was looking at some messages on Zoom. We have Joel Romulus, our speaker next week, Shauna Dykes, and Shauna is Kurt Klein's guest. She's from Junior Achievement. And then just not to isolate or point anyone out, but great to see Dalton Birch's face up there on the screen, if you can see some of the guests. So good to see him joining us today. Not here, I believe, but I'll wait till next week. We had a new member this past week, so that was exciting news. Okay, I thought somebody was pointing. I'll bring that up next week. Last night was a big memorial service, and just please continue to pray and keep in your thoughts, in your hearts, and dear to you, Tammy and Mike Prince, their daughter Mindy, and all the family in that loss, and just continue to lift them up, please. You know, again, careful not to point out too many things, but you know, every week, and this is not to pat myself on the back, but just here to try to be a servant along with Wes. Every week about 11 o'clock, we're here plugging in and bringing equipment and setting up, and it's a long Tuesday. And today he missed without a hitch on his birthday, the birthday boy today, Wes. So happy birthday. I appreciate you very much today and always, not just today, but so he did not miss a lick. So for those members that have not been here, we have some members that are first time back in a while, and it's great to see you all as well. So now we have the privilege of an in-person speaker. And I was looking over and trying to summarize, and I was looking at Colin Murphy and statewide business development for Children's Home Society of Florida, oversaw implementation of 7 community partnership schools throughout North Florida, led initiative and partnership with Wells Fargo and Business Leadership Institute for Early Learning to bring training to 30 child care centers to Northeast Florida, served as Senior Director of Operations, COO of Jacksonville Children's Commission, a 38 million children's service department in Duval County, oversaw the operation of $3.5 million child care program and 1.1 million summer break spot program, committed his entire career to school services and many program initiatives and enhancements for young students. And not to take away from these great accomplishments, but as I was reading through, what really caught my attention the most in reviewing his bio is that he and his wife, Tricia, are the proud parents of 5, did you hear me, 5 children, 6 to 17. Being the parent to one 16-year-old, I now will step aside in awe and let him speak on these great resources that we have and our children and what he has to bring to us today. So I now welcome Colin Murphy, Executive Director of Children's Trust of Alachua County. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, President Brady. I do have 5 children. Now you know why I insisted on attending in person. So before I get started too much into my presentation, I wanted to wish another happy birthday. The Children's Trust of Alachua County has our meetings right here in this building. And it's my understanding that today is the 3rd birthday of the Cade Museum. Is that right? So happy birthday to the Cade Museum. What a really a tremendous asset, and Stephanie Bales and her entire team have really been helpful to us as we try to get acclimated here in Alachua County. The other thing I'd like to say is I couldn't really think of a place I'd rather speak to today at this time. I came in February, and in March, the world went off a cliff. It's been hard to build relationships on Zoom, so this is really my first formal community organization. When I graduated from here and moved to Jacksonville 20-something years ago, the first organization I joined was the Rotary Club in Mandarin in District 6970, and we were 100% Paul Harris club, so I'm glad to say I'm a Paul Harris fellow. And I was in that club until 2004 when I decided to go in business for myself. And my wife quit working, and we had those 5 kids, and now the rest is history, and here we are today. So, but I was always very proud of Rotary's history, not only in all of the services to children that our club provided, and as I scrolled through your Facebook page, noticed that, you know, this club supported as well, but also in the role Rotary played in eradicating polio really throughout the world. And as I was, you know, transitioning to go into business, and my wife was expecting our first child, it was the first time I ran into someone that didn't want to vaccinate their children. And I was just, after all of the work and we had done in our club to support the International Rotary Foundation, I was just really in shock. And so as we're starting to come out of the pandemic and people are coming back into the world, and you know, people are going to get vaccinated. Again, I just can't think of a more appropriate place that I'd rather be today than the Rotary Club of Gainesville. So thank you for having me. If I go on the screen, the other thing I'd like to say, it's always nice to know your audience. How many of you have children? Okay, very good. How many of you love your children? I should have seen the same hands. Yeah, right. Actually, that this county loves children is not really something I needed to ask. When I guess I'm going to need some coaching on where to point and click. I'm afraid, am I doing it right? I'm going to point this way. I'm going to point this way. Or you could click it for me and I just say boom and you move it. Okay, there we go. Yeah, thank you. So if that doesn't work, we'll try that. But you know, this community, I never want to assume that people actually know what the Children's Trust is, because I know you have jobs and other things that you spend most of your time doing. But were it not for the voters of Alachua County, there would not be a Children's Trust. So the voters in this community back in 2018 passed a referendum that established a special district known as the Children's Trust. We levy an ad valorem tax. And it wasn't the first time that this community tried to get a Children's Trust. Back in 2012, there was an attempt to put it on the ballot. But some community activists, you know, known, I guess I learned quickly as the Dorothys, had a lot of energy and not only helped lead the campaign to get this on the ballot, but at the same time that a school tax for school construction was put on the ballot as well, which is just really incredible. The last Children's Services Council that had passed prior to that was 2012 in Miami, and it had failed in 2000 and in 1998. So that this community passed and stood up an organization like the Children's Trust is really a credit to the people that live here. And it also motivated two other communities this last election, Leon County, Tallahassee, and Escambia County, Pensacola, to also pass their Children's Services Councils in 2020. So really what all of you did here at the ballot box not only benefited this community, but really children throughout the state. And so here in our Children's Trust, our tax brings in about $8 million a year. And boom, we'll try the next one. And it's run by a board of directors. And if you go to the next slide, these 5 are appointed by the governor, and I'm sure you know many of their faces. At least a few of them, I think, are members of the club, if not in flesh, at least in the spirit. And the other 5, if you go to the next slide, are mandated by statute. So we have a school board member, the school superintendent, a county commissioner, a judge, and a representative from DCF. So they make the decisions on what the tax is, what the programs is, what the mission of the organization is, and our goals, strategies, and objectives. So if you go to the next slide, please. Essentially, when we look at how to best support children in the community, the board really wants children simply to be able to live in a place where they thrive, and it's that simple. And thriving is a high bar. It's a really high bar. It doesn't mean just existing or just getting by, but it really means having everything a youngster needs. So when they're an adult, they can take advantage of the world and take advantage of every opportunity, you know, presented to them that, you know, best meets with their skills, talents, and desires. And so this is a very busy slide, but essentially what it says is there's some things. Okay. We're going to try to make that work. Well, thank you. Essentially what it says is, you know, kids, there's external things to kids, their education, their physical fitness. And then there's internal things, their social, emotional abilities, their grounding, their sense of self. All of that's important. And when you combine that by all of the systems, that's what it takes to get a thriving child. Now, if you notice the big circle around the outside are all of the systems that interplay that you need to work together to make sure a child thrives. And that includes government, it includes universities, it includes schools. If you click the next one, believe it or not, it includes telecommunications, And if you click the next one, there's a lot of clicking here. It includes, oh, now we clicked too far. Okay, there we go. And it includes the business community as well. So all of those things, thank you very much. All of those things need to work together for children to thrive. And so what you don't see on there is the Children's Trust. So technically we're a government, but because we're extra, you know, we're an extra benefit to this community, is we try to plug ourselves in where the gaps are, where if we just make a little bit of investment, we can make a big difference. So we have 4 key goals for kids. We want to keep them healthy. We want to keep them educated. We want to keep them safe and supported. And that's very easy to remember. So if anyone asks you what you learned at Rotary today, you can say we learned that the Children's Trust keeps kids healthy, educated, safe, and supported. If you can't remember that, just remember the HES truck, because it's the same acronym. Healthy, educated, safe, and supported. That's pretty much what we do. And we do that through 2 ways. One is programs, and that's probably what you'll hear the most about, or what will be talked about most in the community. But you can't have programs to support children without the appropriate policies as well. And children's services councils throughout the state are very involved in policies at the state level, because if the policies aren't right, the programs won't work. So when it comes to programs, we made investments right away. As soon as we began collecting tax dollars. In our first year, we served about 15,000 children. Now, I'd be a little bit skeptical of that number, because several of those children were in multiple programs. So we're getting better in our counting, but still it's quite a bit. The agencies we worked with wanted to touch that many children. We funded about 43 agencies that ran 47 different programs, and it really ran the gamut. The total funding we gave out the first year was $3 million, and as small as $5,800 to as large as awards of over $400,000. So it really ran the gamut of the types of programs that we supported the first year. You can characterize them several different ways, but if you want to look at the types of programs, you have things on there from programs that support health to youth development to capacity building, which is essentially training and professional development. It just runs the gamut. And again, over $3 million of funding in the first year. Now, when we look at the types of programs, and one of the reasons why the trust was successful, at least I believe in getting past here, is that whereas in Miami, the first 2 times, it was really focused on small segments of the community, the promise that was made to the voters here is that this trust would support all children in the ways that they needed it. So we have 3 types of programs. One type of program is universal, and that means it's for everybody. It's available to everybody. And an example, I'll talk about some of these in a minute. An example would be, though, our nurse home visiting program for new mothers. We have more targeted programs that that focuses on either specific focus areas or specific groups of children or specific times of the year. And then we have place-based initiatives where we try to remove all barriers to children and put programs right in place where children and families are. So probably our most notable universal program is the newborn mother's home visiting program. And this is a program that was actually started by the county, that the trust assumed and sustained once we were passed. And every mother in the county can receive a visit from a nurse once they get home within the first 7 days of leaving the hospital or wherever it is they have their child. It doesn't mean every mother accepts the visit, but I think the first few years we visited about 700 mothers out of 2,500 births or so. Obviously with COVID, it went down, but we expect things to pick up again. And really our objective is to visit as many as possible, because when you do that, you're really able to help people before any problem or difficulty start. So the nurses do everything from detect early illnesses like preeclampsia to simply making sure moms have what they need to sleep safe by giving them a pack and play, or simply educate them and refer them to some other services that they may need as a follow-up. So that program is available to everybody. we took a targeted approach this summer. We have made an enormous investment in this summer. I mean, we have just really dropped a turbo blast of funding into summer programs for this summer. Kids have been home and cooped up and really just waiting to get out. So we have invested $1.1 million for slots for 2,000 children for this summer to be in-person programs throughout the county. And this is from kids K to 12. It's all over the county, as you can see, from the rural areas to downtown Gainesville to the east side, all over the county, north, south, east, and west. Summertime is going to be a big priority for the Children's Trust. When you talk about inequity and where children fall behind in school, there is a lot of research that summertime is one of those areas that can make a big difference. If you have any kind of means at all and can send your kids to any kind of summer camp or enrichment activities like we do with our kids, pretty much they could not lose in the summer. They might even stay the same or gain. So in other words, some kids in the summer actually enter school smarter than the year before. The rest of the kids regress. And so what happens is all children can learn in school, but if you keep regressing over the summer, what happens is over time, that gap continues to grow and grow and grow. And so by the time you hit you hit ninth grade, 3/4 of the gap between between, let's say, white and black students can be attributed to what happens in the summer. And so we plan on, and this is year one. We'll see how it goes. This year, the focus is on finding places that kids can go. But as we develop our summer programming, we'll focus more and more on fun activities that they can do that are enriching, but also support what they do in school. So stay tuned. But this year, we really have made an enormous investment this summer, and we're really looking forward to see how it works. And then lastly, when you look at targeted investments, these are investments where you put the programs and services right where the children are. And we're making an investment in the community school at Howard Bishop. One problem that has surfaced in report and study after study is that there are services out there that families and children can't connect to. And so our investment in the community school, in this case, is to provide a wellness coordinator whose job will be to make sure that kids that need anything from dental to a flu shot, to a vaccine, to a primary care visit, will be connected to those resources through the school without having to leave. That's the idea. So that's how we think of programs. And then the other thing we think about is policy. And I always like to be an optimist, and there was a lot of good things actually that happened in the legislature this year for kids. I don't really have time to talk about all of them, but I do want to talk about a few, because as I said before, without the right policies, it's really difficult to make the programs work. So one policy that I think will make a big difference was from our own Senator, Keith Perry. And Senator Perry got unanimous support for a bill this was bipartisan, that expanded expungements for children beyond just misdemeanors and beyond just the first offense. And what we know is that when you have something on your record, it pretty much is a scarlet letter for the rest of your life. And kids' brains don't really function well until they're about 25, but certainly not when they're 17. And so there are some kids where if you can give them another chance, you can make a difference in their life, not only in their life, but in how much it costs the system. Again, this has been juvenile justice reform, and justice reform in general has gotten bipartisan support. And Senator Perry sponsored this piece of legislation. It passed both houses unanimously, and he deserves a lot of credit for that, because it'll make a big difference. The other bill that had passed is, again, an improvement to something that was done by the voters here. And the voters, many years ago, I think it was maybe 2002, I might have the year wrong, but passed a universal VPK program. So if you've had a 4-year-old, they can attend VPK pretty much at no cost. There's a cost differential some places depending where you send them, but it's an entitlement in the state. It's available to everybody. The problem is that there really wasn't a good accountability system to see if those dollars were producing kids that were school ready to the rate we wanted them to be or not. So it took about 3 years to get this bill through, but a bill by Representative Aaron Grawl, who's down in Indian River, and I think the sponsor in the other house was, or in the Senate was Gail Harrell, finally got this bill passed. So it does a lot of things. I'm not going to name it all, but basically it is better reporting on if kids are ready for VPK. It'll let parents kind of look at a VPK center and see what their history has been. And another thing it does is it puts this whole system all under the Department of Education. So in our state, from VPK on all up to college now is all under one system and one department. Both of those bills in Tallahassee were advocated for strongly by our association of the Florida Children's Councils and many others. But especially the early learning bill had been worked on for several years. So again, if you don't get the policy right, it's really hard to make the programs work. So what should we expect going forward? I expect this year to see a lot of activity from the Children's Trust. We have several initiatives. Our community has already been put on the radar of some foundations. We have an investment made by the Pritzker Foundation to focus on our children 0 to 3 and the systems that they go through to improve those. And Mia Jones, who I know is here, is our early childhood coordinator at the Children's Trust. So she's going to make sure that works for us. So there's, yeah, you can clap for Mia. That's all right. And you know, we're looking at several ways to support reading, both increase awareness on one hand and then more intensive supports on the other. We're looking at ways to support the people that deliver the services and increase their wages. One of the biggest problems right now when you look at young children is actually the business of childcare. Many childcare centers in the areas where we most need them are struggling like many businesses, not only because of COVID, but increased pressures from things like minimum wage increases, notwithstanding all the benefits that come with that. But, you know, many of these places are facing challenges where now, instead of being in with children all day, it's just as beneficial to the employee to go work at Walmart. And so while we may be trying to train them and improve their skills, we're competing with everybody else for their attention. And so that's a big problem right now that the Children's Trust is going to try to see if there's a role for us to play in solving it. So I would expect this year to be very busy and look for a lot of activity from the Children's Trust. Not everything we do is going to work, but we're going to take a data first approach and look at what we're doing and, you know, keep trying so we can make a massive positive difference for children this year in a very short period of time. So I thank you very much for the support you gave, not only at the ballot box, but as we've been getting rolling this last year and a half. And if there's any questions, I would be happy to take them.
I'm Deborah Newell. Thank you for your presentation. I believe you've probably made a very complex system understandable to each of us. My question is that you all started with $8 million. So as you spend each year for programs, is the residual amount invested in such a way that it will continue to grow, or is it a finite amount that will eventually go to zero?
Thank you. We collect taxes every year, and we have 12 years, and then you get to vote again on if you want us to continue to do that or not. And so some years we'll spend all the money, and some years we won't, and we'll have a plan to spend it down. But the idea is that we spend as much as possible every year on recurring programs.
Hi, thanks a lot. Annie Orlando, I have a question about your summer programs. You showed a map that had satellites all over the place. And I used to work at the Mailman Center for Child Development, so I have some experience in this area. What are you doing about transportation? Because especially in your rural areas, it's pretty spread out. And I know that's a difficulty getting children to these programs.
Yeah, thank you for that question. We're doing three things for transportation. One is the very first funding initiative that the trust released, even before I started, provided some money for organizations to ask for funding for transportation in the form of capital purchases. So we have a series of organizations out there that own vans and things that have been purchased by the Children's Trust. Second thing is in their budget for this year, we allowed them to include a line item specifically for transportation if they felt it was necessary. Obviously, if the trust becomes a transportation company, we're going to run out of money very, very quickly. So that is a problem, really, that the other systems that control transportation need to help us solve. In preparing for this, I knew that one of my board members, Dr. Simon, was here a few weeks ago. And she helped us solve it a lot for this summer in that we are providing work for her bus drivers. And so we are coordinating with the school district transportation department to make sure that the camps and the buses are all moving on the same routes this year, and to provide as much transportation as we can. Did it so that it'll save us money and it solves a problem for her. Keeps bus drivers employed. And so we're looking at every way we can, but ultimately the transportation problem, that's one of those on that circle I showed that everyone's going to have to help us solve.
Brendan Shortley, thank you. I run a medical clinic in town for the homeless and poor, and I noticed you have the same problem I'm having by looking at your table financially with psychiatric care. Even though you have an equal number of programs devoted to each, and your cost is similar, the number of patients served is much, much lower for the psychiatric care, which obviously extrapolates out to the cost per patient is much higher for psychiatric care, and a great challenge and something we need to keep doing. Are you planning on expanding that or trying to overcome those challenges somehow, or is that just something inherent to the costs of medications, which we have found, or anything related to the psychiatric providers? Thank you.
It's a great question. When I was at the Children's Home Society, we had to provide, as part of our services, a lot of psychiatric care, and just finding pediatric psychiatrists to do anything was difficult. So it's, on one end, it's a supply problem. The approach that that we're probably going to recommend this year going forward for new funding in mental health is, the mental health system is very complicated. I don't have to tell you, but other people may not know. And there's various funding streams and who pays for what, and it's changing. So probably what we'll end up doing is trying to fund some prevention programs on mental health if we can. And then maybe some strategically located therapists where we can blend some resources and have them out in the community at places where kids are, because just getting them to go to any kind of therapy, if they have to go somewhere, usually they'll go to one appointment and never show up again. When it gets into things about psychiatric care for children, I'm not sure we've thought about that yet, because there are some other systems that come into play. But it's a complicated problem, because not only is there funding from us, but there's a supply problem with people that even just do that work. So I'm not sure if that was a good answer, but it's something we need to think about. So.
Good afternoon, Margaret Combs. How are the connections made between the children and the services? You have all these services, you have the policies, you have the programs, the children are over here. What is the connecting point? How are the connections made that bring the children into the services?
That's a great question. It depends. So I'll just give an example. So in our summer programs, we have a criteria of the kind of the type of children we're looking for. We're focusing on income on a graduated scale. So the you know, if you're low, you might be free, but as you move up, there's a graduated scale. And we think that the demand far outstrips even the supply we can supply. So in that case, the connection point is the agencies directly themselves. In the case of what Mia's working on, she's working on trying to improve connection points, because what you'll find is some systems, especially let's say maternal and child health, there's multiple connection points. And depending on where people comes in is where they go, and they don't always go where they need to go. So that's one of the things Mia's tasked with is to try to fix that. And sometimes we may not actually fund a program. We may fund a connection fix to better coordinate people getting into services. So one of the initiatives that I didn't have up on my screen is there's a program called Help Me Grow, which provides a single access point for parents that are concerned about the development of their children. So they literally can call one phone number, 211, and then get hooked up with someone that can care coordinate them through that entire process, whether they need early steps for a young child or IDEA through the school district for an older child. It'll kind of improve that whole connection system. So it depends, but it's a big problem, and it's, you know, areas where we can make investments that'll make a big difference. Well, that we haven't funded that yet, but the agency we fund, that'll be part of the funding, will be to publicize and promote that program. So specifically in Help Me Grow, you're tasked with visiting pediatricians. You have to go to so many community events, you have to advertise, and that's all part of the funding that we provide.
We have a question from someone watching via Zoom from Dink Henderson. Is the list of the 43 supported agencies published?
Yes, it is. You can go to our website, Children's Trust of Alachua County.us. I think there's a part that says our priorities. You click on there and do some clicks, and you'll find them there. It's in our budget documents on the website, so it's in several places. And for the summer programs, there's actually a button that says learn more about summer, and you can see a list and a map of all of those programs. Yes.
Jacob Atim, good presentation. So can you elaborate more on inclusion and exclusion criteria on that group? You're saying there's seem to be an income base. What is the cutoff for these children to be there? That's one thing. Another thing you mentioned earlier, something to do with during the summer, I think you mentioned Black kids and white kids, but I did not really get, can you elaborate more on that statement in terms of, I didn't get the comparison. The last one is in terms of health, with health program, do you overlap with like Medicaid services in that sense? Thank you.
It's a great question. I'm going to try to take them in the order I remember them. The first one was on the criteria for children in the summer programs, I think. And yes, and I believe to totally fund a slot, it was 200% of poverty or below. And then it goes up to 400%. So after 400%, you know, you pay, someone would just pay, but there's a sliding scale between 200 and 400% and 200 or below. But that's not the only criteria. Families in foster care, those children are also regardless of income. If you have a 504 plan, which is special needs, or there's another number plan, I'm losing it, but any special needs from the school district, all of those are also in the program automatically. Now, again, we're pretty sure we're going to have more demand than supply, but that's kind of who we're prioritizing this summer. The second one, I think, was on what I said about the summer and disparities. And a big, one of the things I learned as soon as I got here is there's a big focus on the academic inequities between white students and black students. When you look at, reading, the huge gaps. And my point is that when you look at the research, summer increases those disparities. And so, whereas the Children's Trust can't fund school, there's a lot of things we can't do. Summer is one thing we can do. And if we do the right things, it has been shown to make a difference. It won't completely fix the problem, but we can certainly make a big difference. And so that was my point to that one. And then on the third one on Medicaid, that's a great question. Where I came from, we adopted a policy, and this didn't happen right away, but we adopted a policy where we would not fund something if Medicaid funded it. So we wanted to fund what Medicaid would not fund so we could provide more holistic services. So in the case of mental health, let's say, when I talked about distributing therapists throughout the community, if a therapist is only billing Medicaid, they can do nothing but churn out therapy sessions. And that's not a great quality of life for the therapist. And that's not always what's needed, because let's say we place that therapist in an after-school program, maybe they just need to observe. Maybe they need to sit in with the parents. Those are all things that are not necessarily Medicaid billable. So if we can pay for the non-Medicaid stuff and the agencies can draw down the Medicaid, we can provide better services. So that's the goal. That would be the goal, is to figure out what we can pay for, what other funding streams can pay for, and mix them together to expand services and provide the kind of services the children need. Did that answer your question? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Guy Jopling, and I don't really have a question. I just have a comment. Excuse me. I'm currently the board chair for the YMCA, and we are one of your summer program partners this year. So I just want to say thank you. It's been a great process to work through, and y'all are doing a really good job. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I want to say I have a great team. They pretty much did that whole thing, and they're making the Children's Trust look good. So appreciate it. And I think you plan on serving a lot of children at the YMCA. So thank you, because there's plenty of kids that need it.
I was curious about some of the metrics that you're using to evaluate the program. And my assumption would be that some of the metrics won't be apparent right away and that they're long-term type of metrics. So could you kind of touch on that?
Yes. Without getting too wonky, I'll try to make it simple. We look at metrics on several different levels. So when we look at our community and we talk about things like third grade reading gaps, those are we call those community indicators. We're always looking at those. Some are going up, some are going down, but our board used those to pick their priorities. So things that have been going in the wrong direction for a period of time, for example, children that are born at a low birth weight, we want to come up with some ideas to focus on that, because if you're born low, then you have then you have other problems, infant mortality and all of that. So that's a community. No program is responsible for a community indicator. So for each program, we have specific metrics for things that they can impact. So this summer, because we're just getting started and agencies have to get used to doing business with us and giving us the type of data that we're looking for, we collect metrics in 3 categories. How much are they doing? How well are they doing it? And is anyone better off? So how much would be accurately reporting how many kids show up every day. You'll be amazed at how hard that is for some places to do. But it takes some work, right? So how much are they doing? How well are they doing it? In other words, a how well measured this summer might be, if your camp is 5 days a week, what percentage of the kids are showing up at least 85%? That's an indicator of quality. And then this year for the better offs, we're simply gonna survey people, all right? And say, were you satisfied? That's year one. As we grow this program, there's gonna be specific indicators around kids' social emotional development, around, for example, where I came from, we'd measure their reading scores at the end of school and then when school started to track learning loss. We're not there yet here. We haven't built that capacity, but that's where we're going. And those are the types of things we'll measure. So we're looking at the whole community, and then we're looking at things that programs can control.
Last chance for a question, everyone. I don't see any online. If you're online and you're watching on Zoom, if you have a question, we just have a moment or two to get one in. I'll ask a question from the chair here. Looking at the flow chart in your ecosystem, the one thing I don't see is parents. Where do parents and families fit into the ecosystem?
I thought they were on there, but you could be right. I'll take whoever's word for that. Let me just say this about parents. Parents and parent supports are two key strategies of our funding this coming year. And however, I will say this, and this is something I learned from my boss before me, John Heyman. Kids don't pick their parents, right? So while we want to help their parents, we're not going to wait for their parents to do what we can to help children, right? So one of the bubbles that needs to be burst sometimes is the family bubble, that the parents are responsible for everything that goes wrong, and if only the parents were better. And well, all that's true, right? There's a lot that goes on that impacts, there's a lot that happened in the parents' lives to get where they are. So parents are important, and a major strategy of ours is going to be to support parents. But ultimately, you know, we have to support even the children whose parents aren't ready, and there are things we can do. And so, that's ultimately, parents are important, but ultimately we're going to help kids.
Ladies and gentlemen, please a nice round of applause for our speaker today, Colin Murphy.
Colin, thank you again, not just for speaking today, but for the great work and commitment to our community and to the Children's Trust. As a former Rotarian, you know how Rotary can open opportunities, and that's the theme this year. And we want to thank you for the opportunities that you're opening in the community, and a commemorative coin and a small gift of thank you for today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you again. Great presentation, great day here. Thank you to so many earlier for the little incident, stepping in and helping and being great family of Rotary and doing what you can to help. So I appreciate each and every one of you, and good to see you all, and thankful that everybody's okay. As we close out today with a good quote, thank you, Tom. Children have never been good listening to their elders, but they have never failed to imitate them. James Baldwin. Have a great week, fellow Rotarians.